That evening, my son sneered at the outdated dress I wore. He had no idea I'd designed that very silhouette for a brand now selling out in New York boutiques. I bit back a smile, letting them mock my old lady fashion sense right in front of the press and investors. The next morning, a hidden clause in the contract turned my daughter-in-law's entire influencer career to dust. And when the runway lights dimmed at 7:30 p, my silence became the killing blow. My name is Marion Blake, and at 62, I've learned that the most expensive fabric in the world is silence, especially when it's woven with patience. The string lights cast shadows across Mason's graduation party like loose threads waiting to be pulled. I stood behind the beverage station, my hands steady as I arranged ice in the galvanized tubs, watching my grandson accept congratulations from relatives who hadn't bothered to call him all year. The Vermont evening carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and grilled corn, but all I could smell was the lavender sachet I'd sewn into the pocket of my dress, a habit from my workshop days that I'd never shaken. Marion. More lemonade. Brittany's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. She didn't look at me when she said it, too busy adjusting her phone on its tripod for another authentic family moment. My daughter-in-law had positioned herself perfectly in the golden hour light, her contoured face catching every flattering angle as she live-streamed Mason's party to her 47,000 followers. I lifted the picture, feeling the weight of it in my joints, not from age, but from the hours I'd spent hunched over my cutting table the night before, working on samples for Northlight's fall line. Nobody here knew about those late nights. Nobody knew about the workshop in Brattleboro or the team of seamstresses I'd quietly built over the past 8 years. In my pocket, the brass key to the sample vault pressed against my hip, a secret as carefully constructed as French seams. Mum, could you not stand in the background? Kyle appeared at my elbow, his voice low but sharp. My son wore the anxious expression of someone constantly calculating his image. Brit's doing a segment on party planning. I stepped aside, watching him smooth his shirt, a poorly tailored piece from a chain store that pulled at the shoulders. I could fix that in 20 minutes, but he'd never asked. Actually, Marion? Wait. Brittany pivoted toward me, her smile switching on like stage lights. Could you bring out the appetizers? The ones on the vintage plates tell everyone they're family heirlooms. People eat that stuff up. The plates weren't heirlooms. I'd bought them at an estate sale in Wilmington 2 weeks ago, specifically for this party. Knowing Brittany would claim them as ancestral treasures, I arranged the bruschetta, which she'd pronounce bruschetta, at least 3 times on camera, and carried them out as directed. The party hummed with the kind of forced energy that comes from performing life rather than living it. Brittany narrated every moment, describing the rustic elegance of the Burlington suburbs, the generational gathering of family, though she carefully cropped out Cousin Ruth's oxygen tank and Uncle Tony's walker. At 7:15 p, as the sun dropped behind the maple trees, Kyle clinked his beer bottle with a fork. The sound made me think of my cutting shears against the metal table, a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. Before we toast Mason, he began, and I saw Brittany's eyes sharpen, checking her angles. I want to thank everyone for being here. Building a legacy isn't easy. I nearly laughed. His marketing studio had been bleeding money for 3 years. I'd been covering the overhead through a shell LLC, filtering payments through Gordon Pierce's careful accounting to look like client retainers. Kyle had no idea his success was subsidized by the woman he was about to humiliate. And family support means everything. He turned to me, and for a moment, I thought he might acknowledge something. Anything. Instead, his face twisted into that expression I recognized from his teenage years, embarrassment dressed as concern. Though, Mom, we need to talk about updating your look. These old dresses. He gestured vaguely at my outfit. It's exhausting, trying to explain your vintage fixation to people. Brittany chimed in, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. Right, I mean, fashion has moved on. Nobody wears those classic cuts anymore. It ages you. Marion, like, by decades. The dress I wore was a prototype. The original Northlight number, 03 apiece, that would retail for $800 next season. The pleating at the waist had taken me 6 attempts to perfect. The hem length was calculated to the millimeter. Every stitch was intentional, every line deliberate. You should let me style you, Brittany continued, warming to her audience both live and in person. I'm actually about to collaborate with this amazing indie brand, very exclusive. They're interested in my aesthetic for a capsule collection. She flipped her hair, a practiced gesture. It's all about understanding the market, the game. No offense, Marion, but you wouldn't get it. The indie brand was Northlight Atelier. The collaboration she thought she'd secured was through a third-party distributor who didn't know I owned the company. The contract she'd sign if I let her contained clauses she hadn't bothered to read. I smiled. The kind of expression that doesn't reach your eyes but satisfies onlookers. You're right. I don't understand the game at all. In my pocket, my fingers found the key again, its teeth sharp against my thumb. Northlight's show was in 3 weeks. The heritage line was ready, and Brittany's mockery of classic cuts was being recorded on her own live stream, archived on the internet forever, exactly where my lawyer, Valerie Knox, could find it when we needed it. Mason caught my eye from across the yard, offering a small, apologetic smile. He was wearing the jacket I'd hand-tailored for him 2 years ago, though he'd hidden it under a hoodie. That tiny gesture of preservation, of care for something I'd made, was worth more than all the toasts and speeches combined. The party continued around me, a swirl of performed happiness and calculated interactions. I poured drinks, cleared plates, stayed in the shadows where they'd placed me. But shadows, I'd learned in my years at the cutting table, are where you can see the light best every flaw, every weak seam, every place where the fabric might tear. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks left of their illusions. The numbers never lie, even when the people reading them do. Gordon Pierce's office in Montpellier smelled like leather and old paper, a combination that had become synonymous with truth-telling in my mind. He spread the financial statements across his mahogany desk at 9:30 sharp. Each page a testament to what I'd suspected but needed confirmed in black and white. Marion, you've been hemorrhaging money for 7 years. His fingers traced the columns like a surgeon identifying tumours. $3,800 monthly for Kyle's studio rent, $2,200 for the business credit card he maxes out on client entertainment. Mason's private school tuition, $14,000 per semester. Medical insurance for the entire family, $2,900 monthly. I sat straight in the wingback chair, my hands folded over the portfolio containing Northlight's actual financials, the ones showing a net profit of $3.2 million last year alone. And this, Gordon pulled out another sheet, is what happens to your retirement fund if you continue for another 5 years. The projection showed a 43% depletion. At this rate, I'd be working until I was 75, assuming my hands could still hold a needle. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built a fashion empire in secret while funding my son's fantasy of entrepreneurship. "Show me the automatic payments again," I said, though I'd memorized them weeks ago. He slid the bank statements over. Each line item was a small betrayal, the Netflix account Kyle had promised to take over 3 years ago, the car insurance for Brittany's Range Rover, the subscription boxes she unboxed on Instagram claiming she'd bought them herself, even the wine club membership that supplied their dinner parties where I was never invited. "What do you want to do?" Gordon asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what I should do. "Cut them all. Every automatic payment, every standing transfer. As of today." His eyebrows raised slightly, the most emotion I'd ever seen from him. "All of them. Even Mason's. Mason's tuition is paid through the semester. He'll graduate. After that, if he wants college, we'll discuss it directly. Not through his parents." Gordon nodded, making notes. "And the health insurance. They're adults. The marketplace exists for a reason." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, watching Gordon's fingers fly across his keyboard. One by one. The recurring payments disappeared from my accounts. Each cancellation felt like cutting a pattern piece precise, necessary, irreversible. "Where do you want the freed-up capital directed?" he asked. "2 places. 40% to my personal creative fund. I have some projects in mind. The remaining 60% to a legal retainer account." "Legal?" Gordon's poker face cracked slightly. "Are you expecting trouble?" "I'm expecting consequences. There's a difference." By 10:45, it was done. 7 years of financial enabling ended with a few keystrokes. The monthly hemorrhage of $17,000 money that could have hired 3 junior designers or funded a scholarship program stopped flowing into the black hole of Kyle and Brittany's curated lifestyle. Gordon printed the confirmation statements, each one stamped with today's date and time. They'll notice by the end of the month when the bills come due. They'll notice sooner. Kyle monitors that business credit card like a hawk. He just doesn't monitor who pays it off. I slipped the papers into my portfolio, next to the Northlight contracts and the sketches for next season's collection. The weight of secrets felt lighter than the burden of subsidizing their contempt. "Marion," Gordon said as I stood to leave, "I've been your financial advisor for 15 years. I've watched you build something remarkable while letting them think you're just a widowed seamstress. When do you plan to tell them?" "Tell them what?" I smoothed my skirt, another Northlight prototype. This one in slate grey wool that Brittany would call depressing if she noticed it at all. That their success is as artificial as Brittany's Instagram filters. That the only reason Kyle's studio hasn't folded is because I've been propping it up like a broken mannequin. That you're worth more than all of them combined, Gordon said quietly. I smiled, the kind that actually reached my eyes this time. Worth is subjective, Gordon, but net worth, that's mathematical. And mathematics, unlike family, never lies. The drive back to Ashford took me past Kyle's studio in Burlington. His Tesla was parked outside a lease I'd co-signed 2 years ago when his credit was shot. Through the window, I could see him on a call, gesticulating wildly, selling dreams he couldn't deliver without my invisible backing. My phone buzzed at a red light. Valerie Knox, my lawyer. Reviewed the influencer contract draft. 3 violations of FTC guidelines already. The morality clause is ironclad. Want me to proceed? I texted back, not yet, let them sign first. Another message appeared. This one from Mason. Grandma, Dad's freaking out about some declined payment. Did something happen to your card? The light turned green. I didn't respond. Kyle would have to learn that when you mock the hand that feeds you, sometimes that hand decides to stop reaching for its wallet. By the time I reached my workshop, the one they didn't know existed. In a converted mill building in Brattleboro, my phone had 17 missed calls from Kyle and 12 from Brittany. I turned it off, hung my coat on the vintage brass hook I'd salvaged from a demolished department store, and got to work. The heritage line needed final adjustments. Each piece was a response to their mockery classic cuts they called outdated. Traditional techniques they deemed worthless. Craftsmanship they couldn't recognize if it was wearing a price tag. As my hands worked the fabric, muscle memory taking over, I calculated the timeline. 3 days for Kyle to exhaust his business checking account. 5 days for Brittany to realize her credit cards were maxed without my automatic payments clearing them. 2 weeks until the rent was due on both the studio and their house. 3 weeks until the fashion show that would change everything. The numbers never lie. And soon, neither would I. The pounding on my door started at 6:45 a.m. Aggressive enough to rattle the antique knocker I'd installed last spring. "Mum, open up. We know you're in there." Kyle's voice carried that particular pitch of entitlement mixed with panic, the same tone he'd used at 16 when he'd crashed my car and needed me to fix it before his father found out. I set down my coffee, careful not to spill on the pattern pieces spread across my kitchen table, and walked slowly to the door. They stood on my porch like disaster tourists surveying damage. Kyle's hair was uncharacteristically messy, his usual morning grooming routine apparently sacrificed for this urgent visit. Brittany clutched her phone in one hand and a printed bank statement in the other, her acrylics tapping against the screen in a nervous rhythm. 40 minutes. Kyle pushed past me into the house. That's how long I was on hold with the bank trying to figure out why my business credit card was declined at a client dinner last night. "How embarrassing," I said, closing the door against the morning chill. "Embarrassing," Brittany's voice cracked. "My Pilates membership was cancelled mid-class. Do you know what it's like to be escorted out of a studio in front of everyone?" I returned to my coffee, noting how they positioned themselves in my living room, Kyle pacing by the window. Brittany perched on the arm of my reading chair like she might contaminate herself by fully sitting on furniture she'd once called depressingly vintage. "The bank says you removed yourself as guarantor on all our accounts," Kyle continued, his fingers drumming against his thigh. The automatic transfers stopped. Everything stopped. "Yes." The single word hung between us like a blade. "Yes." Kyle's face reddened. "That's all you have to say. You've destroyed my business." "Your business was never viable, Kyle. I was just prolonging its death." Brittany gasped. Actually gasped, like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "How could you? We have obligations. Contracts." "Speaking of contracts," I interrupted, lifting my coffee cup to my lips. "Tell me about your brand deal, Brittany. The one you were bragging about at Mason's party?" Her eyes lit up, despite the circumstances. That influencer instinct to self-promote overriding situational awareness. "It's incredible. A heritage fashion brand wants my modern perspective for a capsule collection. They're offering $15,000 upfront plus royalties." "Heritage," I repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice for someone who thinks classic design is outdated. That's different. This is about reimagining tradition for a contemporary audience. Reimagining. Another sip. Is that what you call it when you buy vintage pieces and claim you designed them yourself? The colour drained from her face. I don't. The macrame bag you featured last month, I have the receipt from the estate sale where you bought it. The upcycled jacket you sold a pattern for. That was my grandmother's design from 1952. I have her original sketches. Kyle stopped pacing. Mum, what are you talking about? I'm talking about boundaries, I said, setting down my cup with a deliberate click against the saucer. You wanted financial independence. You mocked my appearance, my choices, my entire existence at your son's graduation party. So I'm giving you what you asked for independence. We'll lose the house, Kyle said, his voice smaller now, an echo of the boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. Then you'll find a smaller one. The studio was never profitable. Gordon Pierce can show you 5 years of reports proving that. Brittany stood, her phone clutched like a lifeline. You can't just cut us off. We're family. Family. I walked to the window, looking out at my garden where the morning light caught the dew on the hostas. Last Christmas, you posted a video mocking the handmade gifts I gave everyone. You called them sad craft projects and laughed about donating them to Goodwill. Silence. Mother's Day. You were too busy with a sponsored brunch to include me. My birthday. You sent a text. Mason's jacket that I hand-tailored took me 40 hours. You told him it looked like something from a thrift store in front of his friends. I turned back to them. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to my resources while you publicly humiliate me. We didn't mean, Kyle started. You did mean it. You just didn't think there would be consequences. Brittany's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face transformed with sudden excitement. Oh my God. The brand wants to move up our meeting. They want to finalize everything tomorrow. She looked at Kyle. This will solve everything. 15,000 will cover the studio rent and… Read the contract carefully, I said. She paused, something in my tone catching her attention. Why? Just friendly advice. Check the morality clause, the intellectual property provisions, the penalties for misrepresentation. How do you know about… I know about a lot of things. Brittany. I know you've been using insider information from a distributor connection to get deals. I know you've claimed discounts meant for industry professionals by lying about your credentials. I know the brand you're so excited about has a zero-tolerance policy for influencers who engage in ageism, body shaming, or design theft. Kyle's eyes narrowed. How could you possibly know that… I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't give anything away. Maybe I'm not as out of touch as you think. Mason's ringtone, a song I'd helped him choose, broke the tension. I answered on speaker. Grandma, are you okay? Dad's been acting weird and Mom's talking about some emergency. I'm fine, sweetheart. Are you wearing your jacket today? A pause. Yeah, actually. The one you made me. Sarah said it looks like something from a designer collection. Sarah has good taste. I met Kyle's eyes. Unlike some people. Grandma, did you know Mum's meeting is with Northlight Atelier? She's been talking about it all morning. My smile widened. Is that so? Yeah. She said she's going to revolutionize their whole aesthetic. Make them relevant again. Brittany preened, missing the irony entirely. They need someone who understands modern consumers. Indeed they do. I agreed. Mason, I have to go. Your parents are here. Oh, good luck. Grandma? After I hung up, Kyle made one last attempt. Mom, please. Just reinstate the payments until we can figure something out. No. You're being cruel. No. Kyle. Cruel was letting you believe you could treat me like a servant and an ATM simultaneously. This is correction. They left without goodbye. Brittany already on her phone spinning the story for her followers. Kyle's shoulders hunched with the weight of reality finally settling in. I returned to my pattern pieces, my hands steady as I traced the lines that would become the centerpiece of the heritage show. In 24 hours, Brittany would walk into Northlight's offices, confident in her influence and blind to the trap she'd set for herself. The jacket Mason wore, the one I'd made with love, despite their mockery, would outlast every piece of fast fashion in their closets. Quality always does. The first Northlight dress was born from grief and defiance. 3 months after David's funeral. I stood in our empty bedroom at 2:30 am, unable to sleep in the bed we'd shared for 31 years. His absence felt like a missing limb. Phantom pain where love used to live. The insurance money sat untouched in an account Gordon had set up blood money. It felt like, for a life that couldn't be valued in dollars. I'd started cutting fabric just to keep my hands busy, to stop them from reaching for a man who wasn't there. The dress emerged without planning, a severe architectural piece that somehow captured the shape of loss. Clean lines where chaos lived. Structure where everything had fallen apart. The neighbor, Julia, saw me wearing it at the grocery store. "Where did you get that?" she'd asked, her hand reaching out to touch the sleeve. Within a week, I'd made her one. Then her sister. Then her sister's friend who owned a boutique in Boston. "You need a name," Julia had said over tea. "A brand. Northlight Atelier. After the quality of light in my workshop at dawn. Those hours between 4 and 6 a.m. when grief drove me from bed to cutting table. Northern light clear, honest, unforgiving. It showed every flaw, every imperfection, every place where the work wasn't true. By year 2, I had 3 seamstresses working in a converted barn in Wilmington. By year 3, we'd moved to the mill building in Brattleboro, 2,000 square feet of workspace flooded with that perfect northern exposure. I hired women like me, skilled hands that the fashion industry had deemed too old, too slow, too committed to quality over quantity. Margaret, 67, who'd been let go from a luxury house after her arthritis made her slightly slower than the 20-somethings. Her hand finishing was still impeccable. Ruth, 59, whose factory job got outsourced. She could read my sketches like musical notation, translating lines into garments. Diane, 71, who'd run her own alterations shop for 40 years until rent prices forced her out. She knew fabric like a surgeon knows anatomy. We worked in secret, by choice. I incorporated Willow Harbor Holdings as a layer between Northlight and my identity. The checks I signed, the emails I sent, all went through Valerie Knox's office. To the fashion world, Northlight's founder was a mystery, someone who let the clothes speak instead of Instagram posts. "Why hide?" Valerie had asked when establishing the corporate structure. "Your story would sell." "My story isn't for sale," I'd replied. "The clothes are..." Kyle never asked where I went during those early morning hours. Brittany, newly married to him then, assumed I was taking sad widow walks and once offered to teach me meditation to process your grief more productively. Mason, only 9 when David died, would sometimes find me at my home machine and watch the fabric transform under my hands. The only one who understood that creation and mourning were the same language for me. The business grew quietly, deliberately. No fashion week shows, no celebrity endorsements, no influencer campaigns. Just clothes that fit real bodies, made by hands that understood the architecture of age, how shoulders round, how waists shift, how women want to be seen and hidden simultaneously. The first significant order came from a boutique in New York, then San Francisco, then, unexpectedly, Paris. The mystery of our founder became part of the appeal. Fashion editors speculated about who was behind Northlight's radically traditional approach. One called it resistance through craft. I reinvested everything. Every profit went back into materials, wages, equipment. My seamstresses earned 3 times minimum wage plus healthcare. We used deadstock fabric when possible, vintage notions, buttons carved by a woodworker in Putney. Slow fashion, they'd call it now. We just called it doing things right. The morning I showed Valerie the contract Brittany would sign, she whistled low. The morality clause alone could destroy her. I don't want to destroy her, I said, though my hands tightened on the fabric sample I held. I want her to understand consequences. The intellectual property provisions are bulletproof. Any evidence of design theft, and she's liable for damages up to $200,000. She's been selling patterns based on my grandmother's designs, claiming them as her own upcycling genius. Valerie pulled up Brittany's Instagram on her tablet. This bag here, is this yours? My prototype from 2018. She found it in my closet last Thanksgiving, posted about vintage finds without asking. And this coat, a test run for our winter line 3 years ago. She took it from my workshop when she was helping me declutter. Started selling the pattern as her own design last month. Valerie made notes, her legal pad filling with ammunition. The ageism posts are particularly damaging. This video from Mason's party, she's mocking the exact aesthetic Northlight is built on, while trying to partner with us. The irony isn't lost. Valerie looked up. When do you want to reveal yourself? At the Heritage Show, after she's signed, after she's posted about the collaboration, after she's invested her reputation in being chosen by Northlight. That's cold, Marian. No, I said, standing to leave. Cold was listening to my daughter-in-law mock my life's work while drinking wine I paid for. This is just business. Back in my workshop that afternoon, I pressed the final seam on the Heritage Collection's centerpiece, a recreation of that first grief dress, refined by 8 years of experience. The fabric, a Japanese wool that cost more per yard than Brittany spent on her entire wardrobe, held its shape like armor. My hands, marked by 62 years of living and thousands of hours of work, moved with the same certainty they'd had at 20. Age hadn't diminished my skill. It had distilled it. Every stitch was deliberate, every choice earned. The key to the sample vault sat heavy in my pocket. Inside that climate-controlled room sat 5 years of archives, every prototype, every sample, every piece of evidence that Northlight Atelier was mine, built from grief, funded by loss, created by hands they'd deemed too old to matter. Tomorrow, Brittany would sign her contract, believing she was about to elevate a brand that needed her young perspective. She had no idea she was signing with the woman whose aesthetic she'd mocked, whose work she'd stolen, whose entire existence she'd dismissed as irrelevant. The northern light slanted through the windows, harsh and clean. In 3 weeks, that same unforgiving light would illuminate a runway, and finally, they would see. The evidence assembled itself like a perfect pattern layout, every piece precisely placed. No fabric wasted. My PR team didn't know my identity either. To them, I was simply B, the mysterious founder who communicated through Valerie Knox and paid their retainer 6 months in advance. They'd built Northlight's reputation on craft and quality, never needing a face to sell the story. But now, I needed them to pivot. We're launching the Heritage line at the Vermont Arts and Hands Gala. I told them via video call at 8 a.m., my camera off as always. 20 pieces that celebrate traditional craftsmanship. The timing is perfect. Rachel, the lead publicist, responded, "There's been pushback against fast fashion influencer culture. People want authenticity." "Speaking of influencers," I said carefully, "we need to audit all pending collaborations, particularly anyone who's posted content that contradicts our values. We've actually flagged one." Jeremy, her assistant, pulled up his screen. "Brittany Sloan. She signed yesterday, but we found some concerning content during our deep dive." I kept my voice neutral. "Show me." The screen filled with Brittany's Instagram grid. Jeremy scrolled to a video from 6 weeks ago, a style intervention, where she'd found vintage clothing at an estate sale and mocked each piece before transforming them. One dress. I recognized immediately. It was an original Claire McCardle from the 1940s. She'd cut it up for fabric scraps. "This is painful to watch," Rachel said. "She destroyed a piece of fashion history." "There's more," Jeremy continued. He pulled up her online course, Vintage to Vanguard Upcycling for Profit, priced at $399. The preview video showed her teaching students to copy existing designs and alter them just enough to avoid copyright. She literally says, "Inspiration is free for the taking," and encourages people to hunt through grandmother's closets for patterns to steal. "Archive everything," I instructed. "Screenshots, videos, timestamps?" "Already done," Rachel said. "We also found this." A live stream from Mason's party filled the screen. There I was, in the background, arranging food while Brittany's voice carried clear. "Look at my mother-in-law back there in her costume jewelry and homemade dress. It's giving Depression era, but not in a cool way. Someone needs to tell her that vintage and outdated aren't the same thing." My hands stilled on my desk. I hadn't seen this angle. Hadn't known she'd been broadcasting my humiliation to thousands while I served appetizers at my grandson's celebration. "This violates every clause in her contract," Rachel said. "The ageism alone would be grounds for termination." "Document it all, create a file, but don't act yet." "B. With respect, why did we approve her collaboration?" "We didn't. She went through a third-party distributor who doesn't have authority to make that deal. She'll realize that soon enough." After the call, I drove to the warehouse where we stored the Heritage collection. Each piece hung in muslin bags, protected like the artifacts they were. The centerpiece, my grief dress reimagined, held the place of honor. But it was the second piece that would deliver the killing blow, an exact recreation of the dress I'd worn to Mason's party, the one Brittany had mocked so thoroughly. The lookbook photographer arrived at 10 a. We shot for 6 hours, capturing each piece in the northern light that gave the brand its name. No models, just the clothes on invisible mannequins, letting the construction speak for itself. The final shots included detail work, hand-finished buttonholes, French seams, the kind of interior construction that fast fashion abandoned decades ago. "These are extraordinary," the photographer said, examining a coat with hand-padded lapels. "You can see the maker's hand in every stitch." That afternoon, I met with Diane Calder, my personal coach, though she didn't know she was coaching the founder of Northlight. To her, I was a widow rebuilding her life after loss. "How do you feel about the upcoming reveal?" she asked, her office overlooking Lake Champlain. "Like I'm about to drop a mask I've worn for 8 years. Masks protect us until we're ready to be seen. Are you ready?" I thought about Brittany's contract, signed and celebrated on her stories, about Kyle's studio, bleeding money he didn't know was mine, about Mason, who'd kept my jacket despite his parents' mockery. Ready isn't the right word. Necessary. Maybe. "Revenge?" Diane asked, reading something in my expression. "Justice," I corrected. "There's a difference." That evening, Valerie called with an update. "Brittany's already violating the NDA. She posted about consulting with heritage brands to bring them into the 21st century, tagged several fashion bloggers." "Good. Let her build her platform on quicksand." "Marian, I need to ask, what's your endgame, destroying her career?" "No." I looked at the final piece for the heritage show, a suit inspired by my grandmother's working clothes from the 1940s, updated with modern tailoring but maintaining its essential dignity. My endgame is truth. She's built her influence on lies, theft, and cruelty disguised as humor. The fashion industry enabled her because she's young and photogenic. But fashion, real fashion, is about more than Instagram metrics. The gala is in 2 weeks. Are you ready? I've been ready since she called my work sad craft projects. Later that night, I scrolled through the database my team had built. Every post where Brittany had stolen designs, every video mocking older women's fashion choices, every course sold using patterns she'd pilfered. The file was 73 pages long, but it was a single image that stopped me, a photograph Brittany had posted of herself, wearing my grandmother's coat, the one she'd taken from my workshop. The caption read, "True style is about evolution, not nostalgia. Stop living in the past, start creating the future." She'd tagged it, "Joke age is just a number. But style is forever. Oldest not gold." 2,000 likes. Hundreds of comments agreeing, laughing at the grandma aesthetic she was supposedly improving. I closed my laptop and returned to my cutting table. The final piece for the show needed to be started, a wedding dress, inspired by the one I'd worn when I married David, updated but honoring its origins. Each stitch would be placed by hand, the way my grandmother taught me, the way her grandmother taught her. Brittany thought tradition was weakness, that age diminished value, that stealing from the past while mocking it was innovation. In 2 weeks, under the unforgiving runway lights, she'd learn otherwise. The thread pulled through the fabric with a whisper, building something that would outlast every trend she'd ever chased. The Burlington Hilton's ballroom transformed at 7 p.m. into something between a gallery and a cathedral. String lights created constellations above the runway, while industrial spotlights waited in darkness, ready to illuminate truth. I stood backstage, watching through a crack in the curtains as Vermont's fashion elite found their seats. The governor's wife, the editor of New England Lifestyle, buyers from Boston, Montreal, New York. And there, front row center with her phone already live streaming, sat Brittany. She wore designer head-to-toe logos like armor against her own insecurity. Her pre-show coverage had been relentless, about to witness history. Northlight Atelier finally entering the modern age thanks to yours truly. Kyle sat beside her, uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, scanning the room with the nervous energy of someone calculating potential clients. Mason was 3 seats down, and when he caught sight of me peeking through the curtain, he offered a small wave. He was wearing the jacket I'd made him. 5 minutes? M.B., the stage manager whispered. I was still M.B. to everyone except Valerie, who stood near the tech booth with our folder of evidence, ready if needed. The lights dimmed at 7:15 p.m. Exactly. Music rose, not the pounding electronic beats typical of fashion shows, but something orchestral, melancholic, triumphant. The first model emerged in the opening piece, a coat that could have been worn in 1940 or 2040, timeless in its defiance of time. Britney's live stream commentary carried to backstage. Okay, so they're starting strong. But honestly, it's giving grandmother's closet. Where's the innovation? The second model, the third, each piece built on the last, telling the story of women's lives through cloth and construction. A suit cut for authority, a dress that moved like water, separates that could transition from factory floor to dinner table, honoring the women who'd always done both. I mean, the quality is obviously there, Brittany narrated to her phone. But this is exactly why they needed me. No one under 50 would wear this. Then came piece number 12. The dress from Mason's graduation party, my dress recreated in silk, so fine it seemed to breathe. The model turned, and the hem moved like memory itself. The audience shifted, recognizing something beyond trend or time. The applause started slowly, building. Brittany's voice faltered. That looks like... She turned to Kyle, whose face had gone pale. He'd recognized it too. The show continued, each piece a masterclass in construction. No exposed zippers as design elements, no raw hems masquerading as edge, just clothes built to last longer than the bodies that would wear them. Then the music shifted, lower, darker. A screen descended behind the runway. The lookbook images appeared extreme close-ups of construction details, French seams, hand-rolled hems, buttonholes so perfect they looked like typography. This is what we've always been. A voiceover began my voice, though digitally altered to maintain mystery. This is what we'll always be. Craft over content, quality over quantity, tradition as rebellion against disposability. The Heritage Collection's final piece emerged the wedding dress, ivory silk that seemed to hold light inside its fibers. The construction was so complex, so perfectly executed, that even from the back row you could see the maker's intention in every line. The audience rose to their feet, all except Brittany, who sat frozen, her phone hanging limply in her hand. The models lined up for the final walk. The music swelled. The voiceover continued. Fashion isn't about age or youth. It's about understanding that some things, skill, quality, integrity, never go out of style. Then silence. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice rang out. Please welcome the founder and creative director of Northlight Atelier. I stepped out slowly, deliberately, wearing the original dress from Mason's party, the very dress Brittany had mocked. The overhead lights caught the hand-stitched details, the perfect drape of fabric she'd called outdated. The ballroom erupted, but I wasn't looking at the standing ovation or the fashion editors scribbling notes. I was watching my son's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and shock. Brittany had gone completely white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. I walked the runway with the same posture I'd had at 20, 62 years of living only adding authority to each step. At the end, I turned, and the cameras caught every angle of the dress that had been deemed embarrassing just weeks ago. The applause continued as I returned to center stage. The MC handed me a microphone. "Good evening," I said, my voice carrying clear and strong. "My name is Marian Blake, and I've been making clothes for 50 years. Brittany's phone clattered to the floor. 8 years ago, after my husband died, I founded Northlight Atelier, not as a business plan or an investment strategy, but as a way to keep my hands moving through grief. Every piece you've seen tonight was made by women who society deemed too old to matter, seamstresses in their 60s and 70s who were pushed out of an industry obsessed with youth." I found Kyle's eyes. He looked like a stranger had murdered his mother and taken her place. "We built this brand in secret, not for mystery's sake, but because we wanted the clothes to speak louder than any Instagram post or influencer endorsement. Quality doesn't need a filter." Rachel from PR was recording everything. As planned. Valerie stood ready with the contracts. "Tonight, we celebrate craft. We celebrate the hands that make things. We celebrate the knowledge that comes from decades of practice, not YouTube tutorials." I paused, letting the silence build. "And we stand firmly against those who would steal from tradition while mocking it, who would take the work of older women and claim it as their own innovation." Brittany stood abruptly, yanking Kyle to his feet. But before they could leave, the screen behind me lit up with her Instagram post, the one where she'd called my dress a fashion emergency at Mason's party. Then another post, mocking vintage clothing. Then her course, teaching people to steal patterns. "Fashion is about respect," I said, as Brittany tried to push through the crowd. "Respect for materials, for craft, for the generations who came before us. Without that respect, you're not a designer. You're just a thief with a ring light." The crowd parted as Brittany fled, Kyle stumbling behind her. Mason remained in his seat, and when our eyes met, he was smiling not the polite smile of family obligation, but something real, something proud. "Thank you for joining us tonight," I concluded. "And remember, true style isn't about age, it's about authenticity." The lights blazed, the music soared, and I stood in the dress they'd mocked, transformed into armor by context, by craft, by truth finally told. The show was over. The real work was about to begin. The press descended like hawks at 7:45 p.m., still buzzing from the revelation that had just shattered the Burlington fashion scene. Valerie Knox stepped forward to the podium we'd positioned strategically near the exit where Brittany had fled. The lawyer's presence commanded immediate attention, her silver hair pulled back severely, her suit cut with the same precision as our heritage line. "Ladies and gentlemen," Valerie's voice cut through the chatter like shears through silk. "I'm here to address the legal implications of tonight's revelation." Cameras swiveled. Recording lights blinked red. Marian Blake is indeed the founder and sole owner of Northlight Atelier, operating through Willow Harbor Holdings. This has been documented since the company's incorporation 8 years ago. She held up a folder of certificates. Every design, every pattern, every innovation has been her intellectual property. A reporter from Vermont Style raised her hand. "What about the collaboration with Brittany Sloan?" Valerie's smile was razor-sharp. "Ms. Sloan claimed to have a collaboration agreement. However, she negotiated with a third-party distributor who had no authority to make such arrangements. Her contract is not only invalid, it's fraudulent." She clicked a remote. The screen filled with evidence: Britney's Instagram posts mocking older women, her course selling stolen patterns, screenshots of her claiming design credit for pieces I'd created. Furthermore, Valerie continued, we have documented evidence of Ms. Sloan engaging in ageist harassment, design theft, and fraudulent business practices. Specifically, she clicked again. This course she's been selling for $399 uses patterns stolen from Marion Blake's grandmother's archives. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The contract Ms. Sloan signed, believing it to be valid, contains a morality clause and intellectual property provisions. By her own signature, she's admitted to violations carrying penalties of up to $200,000. Someone in the back shouted, "Will you be pressing charges? We're requiring immediate cessation of all design theft, public retraction of false claims, and removal of all content featuring stolen designs. If these conditions aren't met within 72 hours, we'll pursue full legal action." My phone buzzed. Kyle. "Mom, please call me." I ignored it. Valerie clicked to another slide: screenshots of Kyle's marketing studio website. Blake Marketing Studio has also been using Northlight imagery without permission in their portfolio, claiming credit for campaigns they didn't create. Another reporter. How long has Marion Blake been hiding her identity? Ms. Blake hasn't been hiding, Valerie corrected. She's been protecting her privacy while building a brand based on quality rather than personality. Tonight, she chose to reveal herself because someone who publicly humiliated her was attempting to profit from her work. The screen shifted to video from Mason's party, Britney's livestream, where she'd mocked my dress while I served food in the background. "This is the person," Valerie said, her voice dropping to Arctic temperatures. "Who thought she could modernize Northlight Atelier?" Rachel from PR took the podium next. "Effective immediately, Northlight Atelier is terminating all associations with anyone who's engaged in ageist behavior or design theft. We're also launching a scholarship program for seamstresses over 50 who've been pushed out of the fashion industry. Funded by the penalties Ms. Sloan will be paying," Valerie added. My phone exploded with notifications. Brittany's Instagram was hemorrhaging followers in real time: 32,000 lost in 10 minutes. The fashion blogs were already posting "influencer exposed for mocking designer mother-in-law" and "the most satisfying fashion revenge of the decade." I found a quiet corner and checked the one message I cared about. Mason. "Grandma, that was incredible. I'm sorry about everything. Can we talk?" "Always," I texted back. Kyle appeared at my elbow, his face a wreckage of emotion. "Mom, not here," I said quietly. "Not now. The studio, they're saying I stole imagery." "You did. You've been using my designs in your portfolio for 3 years, claiming them as successful campaigns you ran." "I didn't know they were yours." "No," I agreed. "You just knew they were good enough to steal credit for. Like mother, like son, apparently." Brittany's voice shrieked from across the room. "This is entrapment. You set me up." She'd returned, mascara streaming, phone clutched like a weapon. The cameras swung toward the drama. "You let me sign that contract knowing who you were," she screamed. "I let you sign a contract while you were actively mocking me, stealing from me, and profiting off designs you claimed were outdated," I replied calmly. "Your own greed entrapped you." "I'll sue." Valerie stepped forward. "Please do. We have 73 pages of evidence documenting your theft, fraud, and harassment." We also have your signed confession. That's what the contract amounts to, admitting to these violations. Brittany turned to the crowd, trying to salvage something. She's a liar. She's been deceiving everyone for years. I've been making beautiful clothes while you've been making TikToks, I said. Which one of us is the fraud? Security moved in, gently but firmly, escorting Brittany toward the exit. She live-streamed her own removal, screaming about elder abuse and manipulation, not realizing she was destroying what remained of her reputation with every word. Kyle started to follow her, then stopped. Mum, the money all these years was mine to give or withhold. You decided I was a burden, an embarrassment. So I removed the burden. You should be relieved. We'll lose everything. You'll lose everything you never actually had. There's a difference. Mason appeared, pushing through the crowd. Without hesitation, he hugged me, right there in front of everyone. The jacket, he said into my shoulder. I knew it was special. I knew you were special. Over his shoulder, I saw the fashion world recalibrating. Buyers approaching Rachel with order sheets, journalists typing furiously. The narrative rewriting itself in real time, the widow who'd built an empire while her family mocked her thrift store clothes. Valerie handed me a final document. Cease and desist orders. Ready for signature. I signed them all. Each signature felt like a stitch in a new pattern, one that didn't include Kyle or Brittany, but might, if he was brave enough, include Mason. One more thing, Valerie announced to the room. Anyone currently selling courses or patterns based on stolen designs has 24 hours to remove them before we pursue legal action. We have a list. Phones throughout the room pinged as influencers and upcycling experts realized their own liability. The clock on the ballroom wall showed 8:30 p.m. In less than an hour, 8 years of secrets had unraveled, and with them, the carefully constructed delusion that age meant irrelevance. Ms. Blake, a reporter called out. What's next for Northlight? I looked at the heritage line one more time, each piece a testament to skill that time had refined rather than diminished. We keep making beautiful things, I said. With our own hands, on our own terms. The flash of cameras felt like applause. The backstage clearing emptied at 9:15 p.m., leaving only the essential players in this final act. Rachel handed me the tablet showing the numbers Northlight Atelier trending worldwide. 3 million views on the Revelation video. 17 major retailers requesting meetings. The heritage line sold out in pre-orders within 40 minutes. The statement is live, she said. Short, decisive, exactly as you wanted. I read it on the screen. Northlight Atelier stands for craftsmanship across generations. Respect isn't negotiable. Quality isn't optional. Age is not a limitation. It's an asset. Valerie approached with 2 manila envelopes. Settlement agreements. Kyle and Brittany's lawyers have already called. They'll sign tonight to avoid prosecution. The terms were simple, immediate cessation of all design theft, public retraction, removal of all stolen content, and a binding non-disclosure agreement about Northlight's operations. No money would change hands. I didn't want their money. I wanted their silence and compliance. Kyle stood by the exit door, shoulders slumped like a marionette with cut strings. Brittany was nowhere to be seen. Her final Instagram story showed her in an Uber, crying about toxic family dynamics to her rapidly diminishing audience. Sign here, Valerie instructed Kyle. her tone professionally neutral. His hand shook as he wrote his name. Mom. I. The studio lease ends in 30 days, I said. The business credit line has been closed. Your client list was built on my reputation and my money. You'll need to start over. I know. Do you? Because knowing and understanding are different things. He looked up then, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy who used to bring me flowers picked from our garden. I understand that I threw away something precious for something worthless. Mason stood beside me, still wearing the jacket I'd made him. Dad, you and Mum spent so much time building your image that you forgot Grandma was building something real. Kyle's face crumpled. He signed the last page and handed the envelope back to Valerie. The house we can't afford. That's no longer my concern. He left without another word, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway, a door closing on more than just tonight. Mason turned to me. Grandma, could I learn the real stuff, not the Instagram version? I studied his face, 17 years old, poised between his parents' shallow ambition and something deeper, truer. Be at my workshop tomorrow at 5 a.m. Bring coffee. Good coffee. His smile transformed his entire face. I'll be there. The ballroom crew began breaking down the runway, but I noticed them handling the heritage pieces with unusual care, like artifacts, like art. The wedding dress would go to the Metropolitan Museum's Costume Institute. The others would travel to Paris, Milan, Tokyo, places where craft was still revered. My phone showed one final message from Brittany, "You've ruined my life." I deleted it without responding. She'd ruined her own life the moment she chose mockery over respect, theft over creation, filters over truth. At the exit, Gordon Pierce waited with a small smile. Your portfolio's up 18% since the announcement. Investors love a reveal story. It was never about the money. No, he agreed. It was about something worth more. Dignity. I stepped out into the Vermont night at 9:45 p.m. The air was sharp with approaching winter, clean like the northern light that had guided my work all these years. My car sat where I'd parked it, the same sensible sedan they'd mocked, now surrounded by luxury vehicles whose owners were inside, placing orders for clothes I'd made with my hands. The key to the sample vault still sat in my pocket, but it felt lighter now. The secret was out. The burden of hiding was lifted. Tomorrow. Mason would arrive at the workshop before dawn. I'd teach him about grain lines and bias cuts, about pressing and patience. I'd show him how to read fabric like a language, how to build something that would outlast trends and time. The same way my grandmother had taught me, and hers had taught her. Kyle and Brittany would rebuild or not, that was their choice. Their settlement agreements would keep them from profiting off my work again. But they couldn't stop them from learning the real lesson if they chose to. That authentic creation beats manufactured influence every time. I drove home through streets I'd travelled for 62 years, past the church where David and I had married, past the hospital where Kyle was born, past the community centre where I'd first learned to sew. Each landmark, a stitch in the pattern of a life they deemed embarrassing. At home, I hung the graduation party dress in my closet with care. It had served its purpose not as armour, but as evidence. Evidence that skill transcends age, that craft outlasts cruelty, that patience, applied properly, is the sharpest weapon of all. The workshop keys were already in my purse for tomorrow. Mason would learn what his parents never could, that true fashion isn't about what you wear to be seen, but what you make to last. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, my hands steady, my conscience clear. 8 years of building in shadows had led to this moment of standing in light. The heritage line would be my legacy, but Mason, if he had the patience and the hunger, might be my heir. The clock showed 10:30 p.m. In less than 4 hours, I'd dismantled my son's delusions and my daughter-in-law's career. But more importantly, I'd shown the fashion world that the hands they'd dismissed as too old were the same ones creating the beauty they craved. Tomorrow, the real work would continue, stitch by stitch, thread by thread, the way it always had. I pulled the measuring tape from my pocket and set it on the nightstand, a ritual from years of habit. The metal was worn smooth from decades of use, but it still measured true, like skill, like craft, like the respect that comes from doing something well, no matter how many years your hands have been doing it. The silence in my house felt different now, not empty, but expectant, waiting for waiting for Mason, waiting for the future to be sewn from threads of truth instead of lies. The door to my bedroom closed with a soft click, final as a finished seam. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Marian's journey resonated with you as much as it did with me. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Marian's position? Your comments mean the world to me, and I read every single one. Until next time, keep creating, keep believing, and never let anyone tell you that your craft doesn't matter.